shots? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Hey, hi, I'm Phil Ho. This is kind of our last video, single video on rating sequences. I'm going to talk about multi-loaded systems. Gil, a couple weeks ago, showed how shifting loads change on truss systems. So I'm going to do it with a static. We're not going to shift the load. We're going to add a load to it. Right now, for everybody, we are living in an absolutely extraordinary time of our lives. Everything is changing. Everything is fluid. And it's been an absolute pleasure providing these videos and talking to my brothers and sisters and everybody out there that's watched this. I think we've had 2,000 views on YouTube, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I'm going to talk about multi-loaded systems right now. The thing about multi-loaded systems is that when you have more than two motors, the load is called an indeterminate load. The only way you could physically make this system perfect is with load cells. I have load cells on the system, and we're going to talk about how loads shift with three-point systems and just continue on. So if you look at the board here, the simple equation for loads on a two-point system, which there's a weight on one motor and a weight on a second motor. There's a weight dead center here. There's an L1, which is the distance from weight 1 to the weight in the center, and W2 to the weight in the center. And then there's a full length between the two loads. The simplest equation is weight 1 is equal to L2 times the weight over length. It gives you a fraction. So basically you're just looking at a fraction. If the load is straight between the two motors, then you're going to get 50% of the load between the first two motors, and that would be vice versa if you went from here to here, you add a weight there. The difference in a three-point system, and this is a crucial fact to learn, is that sometimes if you're in a two-point system and you're super close to the load limits on the two motors, by adding one motor in the center, it doesn't help. If you look at the actual physical math calculated by an engineer, and I'm not sure how they did it, if you added a load at the center between two motors, absolutely straight between, it would take 63% of the load. Outside two motors would take 18% of the load. So if you were close to weight and close to weight limits of those two motors, by adding one in the center, you'd be overloading this center motor. So I have load cells set up on all of this. There are load cells on the whole four-post roof system here. The roof system loads are easily calculable because it's still a two-point system. There's one weight between two motors, one weight between two motors, so that each motor carries 50% of the weight. Down to the three-point system here, we've added a third point in the system, and if I look at my dynos here, we have just the truss weight. So the truss weight would be, theoretically, for me, if I was just doing straight-up calculations, would be 25% on that motor, 50% on this motor, and 25% on that motor. That being said, you can calculate the loads here by adding the weights and going through this simple formula here, but according to our engineers, it's not quite perfect, but for us, when we do our load requirements for a show, we calculate our loads with that simple formula right there. So if I look at my dynos right now, all four dynos up top are reading approximately the same. I'm getting 100% load here, and then 50% of that on either end right there, for the complete load being 25, 50, and 25. Okay, we're going to add the lights now.
And anytime.
Okay, and so to continue, we've added our weights here. It's 50% load between the offstage motor and the center motor, and 50% load between the offstage motor, or the center motor and the offstage motor. And then we're looking at our load cells right now to see how well we did. And even though if I took a tape measure right now and leveled everything, we'll still get some fluctuating loads. It could be load speed changes because of different chain lengths or stuff like that. But the upper loads, they're getting a 50% load increase from the load. So the 50% load in the 50% position here is still transmitting 50% of the load and 50% of the load between the 2 points up top. And same on this side, the 50% load here is being transferred from the outside motor, and it's giving us a 50% load increase and a 50% load increase on the upper motors here. On the lower motors here, we've increased our load, like I said, it's going to go up by 50% on each motor. So that gets 25, that gets 25, that gets 25, this gets 20. So this load here has now increased by 50% of the loads of the lights. And then if I sat here and played with the motors, I could look at the load cells and make this all perfect, but it might not be perfectly level, depending on the surface I'm measuring from and stuff like that. If I took a laser level, I could do that, but a simple bump on this motor right here in the center, or a simple bump on the, down on the motor over here, can increase the loads by hundreds of pounds when you are looking at full life loads moving on a system here. Now when we move the whole system up, you're going to see the load increase up on the upper motors here, and the loads here, between these motors, they're going to increase slightly too because they're in motion as well. This is going to see the most load increase because it's carrying the most load at this point. That's kind of a super simplified version of how I look at loads when I'm running production and how I'm physically figuring out what the loads of each motor is. And if you look at the engineers they're saying I'm not doing it quite perfectly, but we can do our best by doing simple calculations of distance versus weight over a full distance. So the way you look at it is just a fraction. So fractions are super important. It's just a definitive straight up fraction of distance, 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 weight over a full distance. And I think that kind of concludes what I wanted to say about multiple loads. And the way to finish it is obviously to say, when you are flying fully loaded systems, it is super important that you understand how loads increase and decrease and how much a simple bump of one motor can increase and decrease loads across the full truss system. So when we stop halfway through and stop a system and say, let's level it here, there's a full-on reason that we level it. Each motor is going to move, have a different load underneath it. It may move at a different speed because of different voltage coming from a distro, but there is changes in the system that happen fluidly as a system moves in and out. To conclude this, I want to say thank you. This is the last one that I'm probably going to shoot. I may do some Vectorworks stuff later with Anthony Powers from Felix that we're going to publish, but it's been an absolute pleasure spending time with you over this, this period of, I think, 3 months now, yeah, extraordinary time to live right now, and we'll get through this. Thank you. Done.